Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. First, I want to thank everyone for taking the time on a not so beautiful morning to come out and be able to join in a rare opportunity, which we are thrilled for. Realizing that some of you are coming from outside of CBC, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Thomas Bates, and I serve as assistant pastor here at CBC. But also I serve as chairman of the board for international partnerships, which has brought the connection, the relationship that Lisa and I have enjoyed for the past 20 plus years with Nick and Maia. But I also want to take a moment just to recognize Kurt Mackey, who just took a big bite. Kurt, if you could just stand. Kurt and his recently deceased wife, Lois, started IP about 26 years ago. I mean, I may have that wrong, but I know but anyway, 25 years. 25 years, and I just want to acknowledge Kurt for what he did so beautifully so long ago. And as I mentioned, International Partnerships is a missions agency, but it works really at this point exclusively in Ukraine. We've got a couple of other satellite efforts outside of Ukraine, but it has been all about Ukraine for the last 25 years. And Nick and Maia Mikhaluk have been the co-directors of that since the very beginning, which is astounding. It's a rare occurrence that someone could have a tenure that long. But God has blessed the ministry in ways that we really could never have imagined. And grown now to the point where there are 17 churches and really spread throughout most of Ukraine. And obviously, there's been a redirection of effort in the last 6 months. Today marks 200 days of conflict. 200 days, which began on February 24th, and 6 months was acknowledged on August 24th. And just recently, as of yesterday, there was some really encouraging news in terms of positive movement of Ukrainian forces pushing back Russian forces in the northeast and in the south. But we're not here so much to talk about military incursions or the politics, but this is about the ministry. But before there is ministry, there have to be people. And so I've asked Maia just to share briefly, just as an introduction. For some of you, this is a first encounter, a first meeting. Some of you know Maia through her Facebook page and her postings, at least one a day for the last 200 days, which we are all so grateful for that you have chosen to do that. So this is the person, and if you want more information, if you want to follow the Facebook postings or international partnerships, there are cards over at the table just next to Lisa, and please take one with you, and you can become part of the intimate community of 40,000 that are following Maia right now. Actually 40,000 plus, because I know Lisa and many others will take the post and forward those to many others. So we're guessing Maia's posts are reaching probably somewhere close to 70,000 people, which is wonderful, but that is not the primary goal. We were talking about this on the way up. The primary goal is that the ministry would flourish, that God's kingdom would be expanded, and his glory be manifested throughout Ukraine. And things have changed over the last 6 months without question, but I'm not going to take any more time except to ask a couple more questions as we move along in this. But Maia, if you could just take a moment to introduce us to Maia Mikhaluk as individual, as mother, as wife, and as grandmother to Brianna, who will be 6 months old this coming Friday, which is the same day that Maia returns to Ukraine. So it'll be a 3-day journey beginning on Tuesday. But Maia, just introduce yourself if you would.
Well, I think most of you, or all of you, know me. I'm Maia Mikhaluk. I'm Ukrainian. I live in Kiev. I can briefly just share how I came to Christ. I grew up in a non-Christian family. My father was a Communist Party member, and I was actually heading for a career in the Communist Party. That in the Soviet times, that was the best you could do. And I grew up not having even a concept of God. In Soviet times, you just didn't hear about God. You didn't wonder about God. I would wonder about aliens because I read about aliens in the science fiction books, but not about God. So when I was a student in the university, studying English as my major, we had a group of students from Biola coming with InterVarsity Global Project, and they were the ones who introduced me to the gospel, to Christ. And this was the first time I heard about God and about Christ. But most importantly, I saw Christ in the lives of the people that I met. My roommates' parents were the leaders of the group. So I always say I've been loved into kingdom. When I accepted Christ, I just saw the love they had for each other, the love they had for me, and I just wanted what they had. And I understood my sinfulness. I repented. I asked Christ to come into my heart, but I didn't understand a lot of the things. I just wanted Christ without understanding all the background theology and all that. So I came to Christ in 1992, and then a year later, my husband came to Christ. We were married at the time when I became a Christian, and you can imagine that was quite a turn from the Communist Party leader to a Christian. When I called Nick and told him that I accepted Christ, after a pause, he said, "Okay, I don't want to hear about it." So we had an interesting year of him not wanting to hear about it, but asking questions and secretly reading Bible. He started from page 1, quit in Numbers. It didn't make any sense. So next year, we had another global project coming to my university, and Jay Shaner, who led me to Christ, his family led me to Christ, he was coming back, and Nick prepared a long list of questions for Jay to corner him, to prove that this is like, I should understand better. And he spent many hours with Jay, and Jay spoke beautiful Russian. He's been studying from his Air Force days, and he later said that God had him study for Nick. So that year, Nick became a Christian. And, looking back, I can say, that first global project of InterVarsity, I was the only person who came to Christ. They spent 6 weeks in Ukraine. One person came to Christ. Not so good, right? But in God's big picture, you can see that you never know. Your faithfulness, it brings fruit. God brings the fruit. And, this many years later, 30 years later, you can see how many people those students have impacted as a result of their faithfulness coming to Ukraine. So we both came to Christ, realized no Christians around us. So God put in our heart to reach people like ourselves, and we started international partnerships with the goal to reach leaders and influencers of Ukrainian society and to plant churches. So in 1997, the Ministry of International Partnerships started. This year, we're celebrating 25th anniversary of the ministry, and Thomas mentioned we have 17 churches in our network. There are actually 25 that we have planted, and some of the churches kind of are going with other alliances. And we are actually in the process of planting 2 new churches in the midst of the war, one in Kiev and one in Lviv. So the ministry, even though we're doing a lot of relief work, the ministry is very much still focused on church planting and evangelism. We haven't become just a relief organization. We're still focused on our end goal of sharing the gospel with people and planting churches. So I'm married to Nick for 31 years, and we have 2 wonderful kids. Our daughter, Sasha, who was pregnant, 38 weeks pregnant when the war started. And she and her husband decided together with us even before the war that we would not leave the country when the war starts. So she gave birth to our most important member of the family, the joy and the light of our lives. Brianna was born 3 weeks into the war. And she was my greatest vulnerability, I think, through these first days of war. We were very concerned for Sasha, not knowing, will we get her to the hospital? Will the hospital stand? Because Russians were targeting hospitals and maternity hospitals in early days especially. So I cried probably more in those first weeks of war than I did in my whole 50 years of life. But at the same time, I can say that, God has given us Brianna in the midst of all this horror as a hope, as strength. They called her Brianna. Brianna from Irish means strong and noble. And she is very much that, strong. You just see this is how God works. This vulnerable, helpless baby, she's given to so many people strength and motivation to pray. And I know many of you probably following me because of Brianna, right? Because of that pregnancy, the scary time, and then the birth of Brianna. So we could see again and again in so many ways how God, even before birth, before my birth, He prepared me for times such as this. And I look back at my life, and so many things have been in preparation, like my study in English and being able to communicate on Facebook in English, my love for photography that helps you to not only read the words, but see it in the pictures. Like every little detail of my life, I can see that God was bringing me to this point to serve Him and to glorify Him. The same thing with Brianna. I think God has prepared her for this time to give the strength and the light to so many people who need it when she doesn't even realize it, when she doesn't, she's strong without knowing it, how strong she is. And I can show you, since I have a chance, I'll show you the picture. Some of you have probably seen this. This is Brianna and the other people around her, and this is my daughter and son-in-law and Brianna, and they have introduced her to solid food since I've been here, and she's like really having the time of her life. Like avocado is apparently much better than milk. She was delighted when she had the first taste of avocado.
So that's an introduction to the family, and then Danny is a sophomore at Asbury University, and you can imagine the difficulty from a mom's point of view, from a dad's point of view, of being separated. So so much of this trip really was based on a mother's love and wanting to reconnect with Danny. So that's where this trip started. Was flying into the U.S. It was a 3-day journey by car, then by train into Poland, and then a flight from Krakow to Amsterdam to Atlanta. And so Maia has been traveling from Atlanta to Charlotte to Boone, and just yesterday morning from Boone to Cashers and Highlands. And it has been a journey of planes, trains, and automobiles, and it will continue today because we were supposed to fly from Macon International Airport to Wilmer or back into Kentucky, and the flight or the weather conditions aren't allowing that. So we will begin a journey after church service at Sky Valley, driving this afternoon into the evening up to Asbury University. But the connections that Nick and Maia have established over the years have been rich and wonderful, and ranging from East Coast to West Coast, all the way up into Canada. And that's been a large part of what the ministry is about, the support that's been generated for the ministry. What happened 6 months ago obviously changed direction in a way, but not really. Ministry has always been the focus of IP, and the war has provided a new opportunity to minister, and in this case, relief efforts that I'm proud to say this church and many others have joined in and very supportive of. And I'll let Maia describe what that looks like and how ministry and relief go together, which is a wonderful opportunity to bring love and the gospel together, sometimes in the form of shoes and food, and also with teaching.
Yeah, I want to start first of all by emphasizing that our decision to stay in Ukraine in the midst of the war was conscious. I never say we were caught in Ukraine by war. We knew 2 weeks before the war was coming into our city, we knew that it was imminent. You know, when the airlines stopped flying, when the embassies evacuated, it was obvious this is it. There is no diplomatic way out of it. So we did make a decision together with my son-in-law and my daughter. We kind of sat down together and we thought about it and we prayed about it. And for me and Nick, there's never been a question whether we stay or go, because we strongly believe that the leaders lead and continue their calling, especially in crisis times. You don't just, do it when times are good, and then when it gets hard, you just get up and go just because you have friends everywhere in the world. And we literally do. Christian leaders of all the people, we're the most connected to international family, to God's family. So before the war started, we were getting invitations to the States, to Canada, to Australia, India, everywhere. I have friends everywhere, and people were saying, just come and wait it out. Just wait to see what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, and then decide. But Nick and I decided that this is definitely not for us. We wanted Sasha and Nikita to be out of country because of her pregnancy, but they are both pastors' kids and worship leaders, and they felt that their place was also in Ukraine. And I will say that's the same thing that all the pastors of our churches did on their own. We didn't have a policy as organization, like nobody leaves or everybody leaves. We let people decide between them and God what they will do, and I'm happy to say that most of our pastors chose to stay because we know this is the time, the darkest time, the times when people need the light the most. And we cannot just abandon our country, abandon our churches, and flee for safety. So when the war started, our churches were positioned in many communities to respond to the needs, to the challenges of the community, and it looks very different in every community that we have. In some of the cities, like Kiev was under siege for almost a month. So the first months for us was like we kept coming to the services. The only service we didn't gather in person for is when we had the curfew. The first Sunday after the war started, there was curfew. You couldn't go out of home. Like I think we had 24 hours over Sunday. So we were doing it online through Zoom. And I remember, that first Sunday when Sasha and Nikita sat at the piano in our living room. I can play maybe a few seconds of this video, and they sang one of my favorite songs that kind of became an encouraging song for me through the war, singing about goodness of the Lord in the midst of this horror that's come into our doorstep. Let me just play this for a few seconds. I know you don't probably know Ukrainian language, but you'll recognize the music. It was just amazing, we were just a few days into the war, and sometimes people ask me, like, did you feel ever abandoned by God? Do you ask God, why, God, did you abandon us? And I can tell you, the war actually has been a time of greatest closeness with God. God is with us in the bomb shelters. God is with us when it's the scariest, when we hear the explosions, when we don't know if we will make it through another minute, when we don't know if we will make it through another night. God has been the closest. And that's amazing thing, amazing experience. And I wouldn't wish for anybody to have the war kind of experience, but at the same time, I will tell you, like, Sasha and I were talking before I was coming here that the war has changed us significantly, and we want these changes. We'll never be the same. I think we became more grateful. We became closer to God. We are clinging to God. We are more honest with God. That's why, if you read in my posts, it's Psalms have become so dear because they're so honest. And the times like this, when we were worshiping God in the midst of the air raids, in the midst of the bombings, were the greatest times of light, the greatest times of darkness and the greatest times of light. I don't know if it makes sense. Like on the first Sunday, a week later, when we could come in person, we had to make a decision. Do we do it? Do we do it in person? Do we continue online? Because we have the technology, right? Pandemic taught us. But we decided to have it in person. Told people, if you feel unsafe, don't come. So not many people were able to come because public transportation was not functioning. But those who could, they came, and you could see this. This is the first Sunday service we had in person, and there was so much strength in being together, and you could just feel how much closer we became during those days. And right now, our church, we meet at 10 in the morning, and some people stay till 10 in the evening. People don't want to leave. And it's not all preaching, Thomas. It's people, we have the usual worship service, but then we pack food to take it to the places that were liberated from Russians. Then we have more fellowship. There is strength in community, and I feel like right now our church became what the church should be, serving, loving each other, and really looking out not only to love inside of the church, but to love the community, looking proactively for opportunities to serve community. The church has grown. I can show you like one of the recent services we had. Still, a lot of people didn't come back from leaving the country, but we have more and more people joining. And this is a picture from one of the recent weddings that we had in our church. And this is just about Kiev. Like I started saying, we were under siege the first month, so we could only get together, but we couldn't go out beyond Kiev. The Russians were closing in. Some of you were writing to me like, Maia, there's a column of Russian tanks 65 miles long approaching Kiev, get out. And it was like, we knew that it could be very real, that we will die next day. And we'd be probably targeted as, community leaders, as pastors. And every day was like, you wake up and you thank God for a new day. And you ask God, like, what can we do to live this day responsibly? Like, as if it's my last day. And very real. I mean, it's not theoretical. It could be a last day. But the amazing thing is, it could be any one of us here could have a last day. You just don't think about it when life is good. But I think it's, again, the war clarifies it for you. The importance, the urgency, the purpose of your life, wanting to live it responsibly. I think that's the good things about the war, though the heartbreak is great as well. And talking about what the IP churches are doing, we're delivering food to the areas that are affected by war. A number of our cities are doing that. We are in a couple locations, like in Lviv and Uman. Our churches became like hubs for internally displaced. Like, to give you an example, in Uman, we have 3 churches, and collectively they distribute 1,600 food packages weekly to internally displaced people, and that's significant help for them because most of them don't have jobs. They left with just a backpack, fleeing the war from some of the very tough places in the south and in the east of Ukraine. So those churches are really having a great ministry.
And those packages aren't for individuals, they're for families.
Yeah, they're for
actually
families,
the impact is 1,600 times probably 4 or 5.
At least 4 or 5, yes. We are distributing shoes for internally displaced kids because, when they left their homes, it was winter. Then there was spring and summer. They needed new shoes, and now we're coming on winter again. We host people who lost homes, host in our churches, like in Kharkiv, that is still being under constant attack. Thankfully, right now, we're pushing Russians very successfully the last 3 days away from Kharkiv. So hopefully, at least there won't be artillery attacks all the time. But when people lose homes, they come and they stay on church floor. We just bought mattresses and people are staying there. We help people evacuate from some of the very harsh places where Russians are just leveling the city to the ground. Like Avdiivka was on the front lines since 2014 when the Russian invasion initially started. But right now, like, Russians have been on the mission to level it completely to the ground. So we evacuated 110 people from Avdiivka church, but there's some still people who are insisting on staying there. So our pastor, Alex, keeps going back and forth, bringing the food and water. So the churches are doing a lot of the relief work, but at the same time, we're still, like I shared with you, it's very much focused on evangelism and on church planting. Evangelism because, people want help, but they also need hope. When we bring help to the villages, people want to talk to us. They want, you're from Kiev, from capital. What do you know? When is this going to be over? And actually, I would say there are no atheists in Ukraine right now. Everybody says, God is with us. God will give us victory. God will judge Russians. And people are kind of looking at God as a judge. There is recognition, which is a big deal compared to there is no God, I'm in control. They're looking to God as a judge, but they don't know God as a father who can very personally comfort them. And that's where we can share with them. Like, it's been scary for me in Kiev. My daughter was on the floor the last 3 weeks in the bomb shelter, 3 weeks of her pregnancy. It's very scary, but I trusted God the judge, but also had God the Father who gave me comfort and peace. And it's very natural conversations with people. And we see people coming to Christ. Again, like I said, this was a very right decision for us to stay. This is the time for church to shine Christ's love in the times of darkness. And of course, it ministers to people, but it also ministers to our church. And I want to, if we still have time, right? I'll show a short video. This is in the early days of our church beginning to send supplies to the liberated areas, and you can sense probably better than through my words the excitement, the joy of serving, because again, remember, these people in this video at the time, it's still early spring when Russians were close, when the danger was very, very tangible. When we were packing and helping other people, we were kind of refocusing from our fears to helping others. It just brings joy and energy like nothing else. Let me show you this video. These are suburbs of Kiev, very close to where we are. And you see we're packing food here, but I think many of you have been part of this effort because you've been sending us help, been sending funds, and we're able to buy food and pack it and take it to the people in need. So it's very much an international partnership, right there.
And I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the really significant transition that the staff in Ukraine had to make in order to make this successful. These were pastors of churches, folks who were on the ground just helping to coordinate church growth, and suddenly asked to be part of a very significant relief effort. And the response of the staff, the vast majority of whom chose to stay, even Alex. And I want to just take a moment to speak of Alex. Alex is, I think, maybe 22 or 23.
Well, probably closer to 30 already.
He-
You've been
he's-
supporting him for a while.
He aged a lot in the last few years. But I remember talking to Alex when he probably was more mid-20s. He was in Seattle, Washington, and he wanted, and he's American Ukrainian. He speaks Ukrainian, which set him up beautifully for going over to serve in a capacity as an untrained pastor, but going with a pastor's heart. And at that point, Avdiivka was actually under attack. And there are pictures of his apartment with shrapnel scars on the walls, windows blown out, and so many other things. And I just thought, here's someone in his 20s who chose to step into a very difficult situation, and he has chosen to stay, and now can't stay because it is truly, it's a risk of life and death for him on a daily basis. But he goes back and forth from a town just outside of Avdiivka to go back in and try to recruit people to come out. His is a little bit of an extreme situation, but so many of the other pastors have had to learn how to become relief workers. And we understand this, that we're not really, as an organization, we're not set up for this. So we're asking pastors to change their roles and responsibilities to become pastors and something else. And that has been powerful, it's been challenging, and quite frankly, we've been overwhelmed with resources that have been committed to IP, to the point where we don't have any paid staff on stateside. Administratively, we have one bookkeeper who works part-time, and she's been working more and more full-time just to try to keep up with the donations that are coming through. One of the biggest challenges that we face right now is how to get sufficient funds in a timely manner into Ukraine. And we have exhausted our treasurer and secretary-treasurer have exhausted every means known. We're using every possible vehicle, sometimes literally vehicles, to get money into Ukraine. So as you pray and continue to support IP, just keep that as a prayer request that we can get sufficient resources in, because we get weekly reports now from Nick and Maia in terms of where the need exists, and now the challenge for us is to be sure we get the resources to them so that they can get the resources out to the people. We just had lunch with Kurt yesterday and shared with a couple of other individuals that IP now has groups as large as Samaritan's Purse contacting international partnerships, because those larger groups recognize that IP has inroads and access to cities and individual locations that the larger groups don't have those connections and relationships. So this is where the intimate connections to these places and people have proven to be a wonderful point of access, not just to get resources to, but to continue to get the good news to. But it's been a blessing to just see the way in which the staff and the ministry teams throughout Ukraine, and also the staff stateside, volunteer staff stateside, have stepped up to take care of this. And I just will say this about Maia. I've never witnessed faith and love in action as much as I have in Nick and Maia. And you heard the heart's cry of a soon-to-be grandmother and now grandmother of understandable first concerns for a daughter and a son-in-law and a baby girl. And Maia doesn't see this as sacrifice. And I would dare say that the majority, if not all of our staff in Ukraine see this as opportunity. And I just want to thank you. Just for the example, the profound example of Christian love and service that we rarely get a chance to participate in just because we live such relatively comfortable lives. And I just want to acknowledge that and thank you personally.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you. It's truly not a sacrifice. Like I told before, this is the time when we really see how God prepared us for a time such as this. I think every one of us live in this on the daily basis. Like the last day, it helps you understand how much God is blessing us. I think before the war, and maybe you can relate to that, we lived a life of entitlement. You take so many things for granted. You wake up in the morning, you take a hot shower. Do you think that's a big deal? It is a big deal. You have running water. It is a big deal. You don't wake up with air raids. It is a big deal. I think one of the things that matters for the quality of our life is not so much the circumstances around us, more a condition of our heart, right? Are we grateful? Do we count the blessings? And there are so many. I mean, you just go through today and count your blessings. It's going to be huge list. Or do you live a life of entitlement and then you get upset about the little unimportant stuff and you're not grateful? You just, I think we're living the most, the life filled with gratitude right now, because we recognize that everything, every little thing in our life is a blessing and it's a gift from God. And of course, Brianna is the huge gift from God, but everything, we recognize it as a gift of God. And I think this is an important time for Ukraine. We see that there is, the spiritual change. There is a beginning of revival because people are turning to God. And we are grateful to God for opportunity to be used by Him in the midst of these dark times and to be kind of reflection of His light. The light is not in us, right? We're just like, I'm a photographer. When you take a picture, you're not taking a picture of an object. I would be taking a picture of light reflection on Thomas. And that's how we feel. It's God's reflection, God's light reflection on us is what lights things around us. So it's a very important time. And we do see this as a battle, literally a battle between light and darkness. And it's a physical war, very physical, very real, pain and heartbreak and losses. But at the same time, it's a very spiritual war. It's the war between light and darkness. And that's why I want to thank you for keeping us in your prayers, for carrying us with your prayers. I remember, I think I shared that episode from Lord of the Rings. We're big fans. If you've seen the movie or read the book, you might remember Frodo and Sam walk into Mordor to destroy the ring of evil. And Frodo is out of energy. He has no more strength to go. And Sam turns to him and says, Mr. Frodo, I cannot carry your burden, but I can carry you. And that's how we felt during these days, especially in the beginning, but even now. We feel like you're carrying us through this darkness, through this valley of shadow. You're carrying us in your prayers. And I want to ask you to please don't give up. We're coming on probably a difficult winter. It's important that we continue focusing on the Lord, continue focusing on praying for His protection and praying for His victory, because even though the media already lost the interest, maybe the war is still continuing, and we need your prayers. We need you to be a part of this. And if we have one more
Sure.
time for a short video, I wanted to show you this video just to remind you how real this thing is.
I cannot watch this video without tears because it's a compilation of just the kind of heartbreak that my people are going through. And I want you to remember this when you pray for us. We're sharing about the positive things, right? I'm telling you about how great churches are doing, but the heartbreak is still daily. We're still facing this. So let me play this. This may be the last thing before we end, but. This last words are saying the victory will be ours. And like I said, please continue praying with us. Our army right now is doing really great. The last 3 days, they have liberated more territory than Russians captured since April. So please pray that our army will clear our land from invaders so we can start rebuilding. But also pray that really we come out of this suffering better people, humbled in front of God, and really, committed to following Christ and glorifying Him through what we're doing in Ukraine. And I would also appreciate your prayers continued prayers for protection of my family. And for me, on Tuesday, I'll be going home, and I want to go home. I want to go to Brianna. I want to hug her. This is going to be great. It's her six months birthday when I come on Friday. But on Tuesday, I will have to say goodbye to Danny. And it's hard not knowing, so and pray for Danny. I think people are praying for us because we're in the midst of all this, but it's been really difficult for him as well. He's here in the States in safety, but his heart is torn and broken. So pray that God gives us courage and perseverance. I mean, we're committed, but I still, it's a heartbreak every day on a different level. So please continue carrying us in your prayers.
And we're going to take just a few minutes just for some questions, and just want to be mindful of the time. We're going to need to absolutely be out of here because Children's Church is going to inhabit this space at 10:30. And Maia will be able to stick around for a little bit after that, but then she actually has a presentation in the service, so we need to make sure she gets there for that. And then she's off to another church. I'm just reminded of the passage in Matthew in the Beatitudes where it says, blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of the kingdom. And I'm reminded that there are blessings that come, and you've heard about the blessings, but the persecution is nonetheless real. And so just, as Maia has asked, just continue to be prayerful and mindful of that. Going forward, because it won't necessarily remain as headline news, but it is of headline importance in all of our lives. So anyone have a question you'd like to ask at this point?
Wow. Just one of the things you said that I just stuck out, among many, and just thank you so much for this example. It's very humbling. But you said they want help, but they want hope. That's just such a very succinct way of us, talking about the whole situation. And as far as the hope part, I just wondered if people are giving you some sort of Bibles, or, I know that we've given out during COVID a tract that says hope starts here, and it's the Gospel of John, but it also leads people through the prayer, and it's just a wonderful small thing. I didn't know if something like that might be helpful.
Have tracts sometimes that we distribute, and a lot of, I think the most effective is the personal conversations, but we also have New Testaments, Gideon New Testaments that we distribute, and we have access to free New Testaments, so that's what we've been distributing. We probably need to find some Bibles with larger print, because some of the places we go to, people are older, and if it's a small New Testament, it's really hard. But yeah, we are distributing the literature as well.
Well, I just thought when you said the Biola group that you were the one.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I know that you're planning the ones now.
yeah,
the
yeah,
next ones, so
yeah.
I'll get on your Facebook.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there are cards. On the cards there is my Facebook account. If you haven't seen it, please join. I am committed to continue writing every day. It's been 200 days. I can't believe it. I started writing in Word because sometimes I would write a long post, I post, and it disappears into nowhere. So I'll write in Word and then copy paste. I have more than 300 pages now. And I will continue writing. Please continue praying. Somebody asked how much you need. We are, some of the things I shared, the food packages are $10 to $15, and that takes care, like, for a week. It's basic food. It's not like your normal kind of ration, but it will keep somebody from starving for a week. Children's shoes, $10 to $15, depending. Summer shoes cheaper, winter shoes going to be more expensive. We're trying to raise funds for firewood for the villages, because the winter is coming very soon. It's like cost $250 to heat the house for the whole winter. So there are different specific smaller things, but also please support our staff, because we also need to support them financially through this time, because this relief will not get anywhere without people. So we need support for staff. Support staff is $600 a month, kind of on the average.
And just for anyone who's interested, you can either give directly to IP, to International Partnerships, online or by mail, and that information you can find through the card. Or if you're familiar with and comfortable with just simply writing a check to CBC, just be sure when you do that, mark it in the memo space for IP Ukraine, and every dollar that comes in will go to IP Ukraine. So a couple of different ways to get funds. Any other questions? Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the medical services and also the orphan situation.
The medical services, depending on the city, like in Kiev, things have restored. Kiev, other than constant air raids and anti-tank hedgehogs, I would say functioning almost normal. If it's the cities right on the front lines where, Russians continue shelling, there's nothing there. We do take medications to some of the liberated villages, and the most needed medications are for heart and blood pressure. And I think I shared in some of my posts, in Ukraine you can buy medication without prescription. So like a supply for 3 months for high blood pressure is like, I think $25, something like that. I mean, it's not big. And we do need that. People always ask. Orphans, the biggest heartbreak for us is that Russians on occupied territories, they took kids, they deported kids to Russia, but almost 200,000. And we don't know how we will ever get them back because, adults are also almost more than 1 million people forcefully deported to the far east of Russia. Adults are finding way to get back to Europe, to Ukraine, through Russia, through Baltics. They come back to Ukraine. It's expensive, and it's an effort to get back. But the kids, I don't know how we'll ever get kids back. And in other places, orphanages have been evacuated, sometimes to Europe, Eastern Europe, sometimes to west of Ukraine. So, there is effort to help orphanages right now more than ever. But like I said, please pray that I don't know. I don't even know what is the solution for those who have been taken to Russia by force.
Other questions?
Yeah, there's a question.
You kind of hinted at the answer, but how stable is the situation around Kyiv?
Well, I don't know how to answer that. The air raids are daily. Like as I was sleeping through the night here, this last night, there were 2 air raids at home. I get a notification on my phone. I haven't been muting it, just want to know what's going on there. So the air raids and the missile strikes are ongoing, but at least Russians are pushed from Kiev, from the ground, because when they were surrounding Kiev, we were not getting supplies. The stores were gradually getting emptied. The medications were very scarce, long lines in drugstores. Now, there is no there are no tanks around Kiev, but the missiles are reaching everywhere. I mean, they are long-range missiles hitting Lviv, which is the most western part of Ukraine. So when people say, where is a safe place to come, it's all relative. I mean, we're used to air raids. In the early days, I think the first 6 months we spent in bomb shelters. Whenever air raid starts, we go to bomb shelter, which was a corridor between our apartments. I think some of you might have seen pictures of that. Because Sasha was pregnant, we didn't go to bomb shelters, so we just stayed between 2 apartments where there are no windows. This was like one of the first days. Sasha was the only one on the floor. And then we realized we're going to be spending a lot of time here, so we made it cozy. And we were sleeping on the floor for 6 weeks. But now I hear air raid, I wake up and I stay awake praying, but I don't go to the corridor, just hoping that it won't hit us. But whenever the air raid is on, something's flying somewhere, it's going to hit and kill people. So.
Any other questions? Yes.
What's your best source of news? Like, how do you know what's going on? How do you know what to believe?
Yeah. Well, we have a big network of churches around Ukraine, so we know firsthand what is happening in places. We also have a lot of our men from the church, our church and other churches are serving on the front lines, so we're getting some insider information, even something that is not broadcasted in news. But there are 2 websites that I would recommend, like nv.ua, and I think they have an English version, Новое Время, New Time, NVUA. They have like a Telegram channel. That's where I usually go. Like I don't have time to go to read big articles, but I'm reading like all the time the latest. And there's another one, Ukr Pravda. and it also has an English version, and they give like the latest. Like if Kiev is hit, like right away you will read like the explosions are heard in Kiev, but they will not tell you where exactly. And that's the struggle for our son when he hears the Kiev is hit. Like where? He calls us immediately. Like, are you guys okay? Is it close to home? So we do just get small snippets. We're so obsessed and hooked on news. Like, I couldn't sleep last night. I finished my last Zoom meeting at midnight, and I thought, okay, I'll get this time almost 7 hours of sleep. But then I got on the news. There's like great news, you know, Ukrainian army liberating this village, this town, and I just couldn't stop reading. I stayed up till 1:15 just catching myself up on how much progress our army has made. And I could just feel the victory soon. You know, I can only imagine what kind of celebration I think around the world will be when Putin's regime is finished. But at least we need to push them out of our country. So getting this news on Telegram channels, if you know Telegram Messenger, kind of like WhatsApp, Viber, Telegram is where a lot of Ukrainian news has presence. Yeah.
Any other questions? No. All right. Well, Thomas had to go meet for the with everybody for the service, so I think we will wrap up now. There is a lot of wonderful tidbits in here and coffee if you would like to come. Can we just pray for Maya? Can I ask somebody to come? Mike, will you come up and pray for us?
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I pray for Maya and Nick and all their family and ask that you continue to use them as faithful servants, give them strength in this time of adversity, comfort them. Blessed are those who mourn. We know there's a lot of mourning going on, but we know your promise is there for them. And just pray that your spirit and your wisdom and your strength be upon them. Guide the rest of the world as they stand with the Ukrainian people in this invasion, and help the world rally around and help this nation deal with this adversity. Bless us as a church as we worship today. Fill us with your joy and spirit as we gather in your house. Bless all the churches in this area too, Lord, as they seek to serve and bear witness to your truth and your love. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.